What is the true value of $1? For most, it's 4/4 a cheap coffee, a lottery ticket. But what if a single dollar held the power to shatter your life, only to rebuild it into something unimaginable? This isn't a fairy tale. This is the story of Maya, a waitress drowning in debt, and Silas Sterling, a billionaire who could buy the world but was searching for something money couldn't purchase. He left her a $1 tip on a $500 bill. It was an insult, a test, an act that would ignite a chain reaction of ruin, revelation, and redemption. Her reaction in that one heartbreaking moment didn't just change her day, it changed her destiny forever. Stay with me, because you won't believe where this single dollar takes her. The air in The Gilded Spoon was thick with the scent of money. It smelled like seared scallops, aged Bordeaux, and the faint, expensive perfume that clung to the cashmere coats in the cloakroom. For Maya Rodriguez, it mostly smelled like pressure. It was a constant, crushing weight that settled on her shoulders the moment she pushed through the heavy oak doors for her shift, and only lifted when she collapsed onto her lumpy mattress at 2 a.m. At 26, Maya's life was a frantic exercise in financial triage. Every dollar she earned was already spent, allocated to one of 3 ravenous black holes: the rent for her tiny, drafty apartment in Queens, the towering pile of her mother's medical bills, and the sliver she kept for instant noodles and bus fare. Her mother, Clara, was her entire world, a woman whose laughter used to fill every room, now confined to a sterile white one at St. Damian's Hospital, fighting a rare autoimmune disorder that doctors spoke about in hushed, expensive tones. Each day was the same. Wake up. Visit her mum, pasting on a bright, hopeful smile that felt like a lead mask. Go to work, where she'd spend 8 hours serving people who spent more on an appetizer than she made in a day. Go home. Cry. Sleep. Repeat. Her uniform, a crisp black dress, a starched white apron was her armor. Her smile was her shield. Inside, she was a warrior, fighting a battle no one could see. Her co-worker, Chloe, a sharp-witted woman with an even sharper tongue, saw glimpses. "Look at table 7, Chloe whispered, nodding towards a group of men in bespoke suits, laughing loudly as they ordered another $300 bottle of wine. "They've been here 2 hours, Ran, you ragged, and I guarantee they'll tip you 10% and think they're philanthropists." Maya just offered a tight smile. "A tip is a tip, Chloe. It all goes in the jar." "Your jar is for Clara." Chloe said, her voice softening. "Mine is for a vacation to Aruba." There's a difference. There was a difference. Maya's jar, a large glass pickle jar she kept hidden in her closet, was her temple of hope. Each crumpled bill and handful of coins was a prayer, a tiny step closer to affording the experimental treatment that was Clara's last real chance. The jar was heavy, but never heavy enough. On this particular Tuesday night, the city was slick with a cold autumn rain. The restaurant was unusually quiet, the low hum of conversation a gentle counterpoint to the storm outside. Maya was on autopilot, her movements a graceful, practiced ballet of efficiency. And then he walked in. He didn't look like their usual clientele. While the other patrons wore their wealth like a second skin, this man wore a simple, well-worn tweed jacket over a plain grey sweater. He was older, perhaps in his late 60s, with a face etched with lines that spoke more of contemplation than of laughter. His grey hair was unruly, and his eyes, a startlingly clear blue, seemed to see everything. He took a small table in Maya's section, a quiet corner booth that offered a view of the rain-streaked street. "Just one tonight," Sir Maya asked, her professional smile clicking into place. He nodded, placing a worn copy of Meditations by Marcus Aurelius on the table. "Just one," he confirmed, his voice a low, gravelly baritone. Throughout the evening, he was the perfect customer, polite, undemanding, and quiet. He ordered the pan-seared duck, a glass of Malbec, and a side of roasted asparagus. He ate slowly, deliberately, often pausing to gaze out the window. He asked Maya a few simple questions. "Have you worked here long?" "Almost 3 years, sir," she replied, refilling his water. "Do you enjoy it?" The question caught her off guard. No one ever asked that. They asked where the restroom was, or if the fish was fresh. They didn't ask about her. She hesitated for a fraction of a second. "It pays the bills, sir. And I meet interesting people." He offered a small, sad smile. "Yes. Money. It's certainly a thing, isn't it?" When he was finished, he waved her over for the check. The total came to $487.50, including a bottle of wine he'd ordered after his meal, which he barely touched. He handed her a black credit card. It was heavy, made of some kind of metal, and bore a single name, S. Sterling. Maya ran the card and returned with the slip for him to sign. "Thank you for dining with us, Mr. Sterling. I hope you enjoyed your meal." He looked up at her, his blue eyes holding hers for an uncomfortable moment. It felt as though he were looking not at her, but into her. "Thank you, Maya," he said, reading her name tag. "You were very efficient." She retreated to the service station, her heart thumping for a reason she couldn't explain. She watched as he carefully signed the slip, folded it precisely in half, and placed it on the edge of the table. Then from his pocket, he pulled out a single crisp $1 bill and laid it neatly on top of the folded slip. He stood put on his tweed jacket and walked out into the rain without a backward glance. Maya stood frozen, her eyes locked on the table. A $500 meal and a $1 tip. It wasn't a mistake. It was deliberate. The crispness of the bill, its placement on top of the signed slip, it was a statement. Chloe walked over, following her gaze. No way she whispered, her eyes wide. On a $500 tab, what kind of monster? The air rushed out of Maya's lungs. It was more than an insult. It was a judgment. It was the world telling her in the clearest possible terms exactly what she was worth. $1. All her effort, her smiles, her aching feet, her silent prayers for her mother, all of it was worth a single, meaningless piece of paper. The weight on her shoulders suddenly became unbearable, and for the first time in a long time, Maya felt the horrifying lightness of having nothing left to lose. The single dollar sat on the table like a verdict. Chloe was already fuming on Maya's behalf. "I'm going after him," she hissed, untying her apron. "I'll give him a piece of my mind. That smug, tweed-wearing. Who does he think he is?" "No, Chloe, don't," Maya said, her voice barely a whisper. Her gaze was still fixed on the bill. It wasn't just paper and ink. It was a symbol of her entire struggle. It was the condescending smirk of the insurance agent who denied her mother's coverage. It was the pitying look from the hospital administrator when she'd begged for a payment plan. It was every rich customer who had ever looked through her as if she were part of the furniture. Her manager, Mr. Henderson, a man whose spine was made of restaurant policy and whose heart ran on profit margins, scurried over. "Is there a problem here? Ladies' table 9 is complaining about the wait for their dessert." He saw the bill slip and the lone dollar. His face, usually a mask of forced hospitality, tightened into a knot of fury. "What is this?" he snapped, snatching the receipt. He unfolded it. $487.50 and $1. He looked at Maya, his eyes accusing. "What did you do? Did you spill something on him? Were you rude?" "No, Mr. Henderson. He was perfectly pleasant, and so was I." Pleasant customers don't leave a $1 tip on a bill this size, he retorted, his voice rising. This reflects on the entire establishment. This is unacceptable. The injustice of it all churned in Maya's stomach like sour milk. She had done everything right. She had been polite, efficient, and invisible, just as she was supposed to be. And this was her reward. Anger, hot and sharp, flared in her chest. She wanted to scream. She wanted to rip the dollar bill into 1,000 tiny pieces and let them rain down like confetti of her shattered hopes. But then something else surfaced. A strange, unexpected thought pushed through the rage. She remembered the man's eyes. They weren't cruel or arrogant. They were lonely. She remembered the worn book of philosophy on his table. She remembered his sad little smile when he spoke of money. What if he wasn't rich? What if the fancy credit card was a front, a last-ditch effort to feel normal for one night? What if he was a retired professor living on a meager pension who had saved for months to have one last beautiful meal, and the final bill had shocked him, leaving him with only $1 to his name for the rest of the week? The tweed jacket, the quiet demeanor, it all clicked into a different, more tragic picture. Or what if he was rich, but his spirit was utterly bankrupt? What if he was so surrounded by wealth that he had lost all sense of human value? A man so poor on the inside that $1 was all the kindness he had left to give. The anger in her chest subsided, replaced by a wave of profound, aching pity. He hadn't insulted her. He had revealed his own poverty. With a strange calmness settling over her, Maya walked to the table. Mr. Henderson and Chloe watched, mystified. She picked up the credit card slip, tore it into small pieces, and dropped them into her apron pocket. Then she gently picked up the $1 bill. She looked at it for a moment, then turned and walked purposefully towards the front door. "Maya, what are you doing?" Chloe called out. "Get back here," Mr. Henderson commanded. She ignored them. Pushing open the heavy door, she stepped out into the biting wind and driving rain. She scanned the street. There he was, about half a block away, standing under an awning waiting for a cab. He hadn't gotten far. Holding the dollar bill tight in her hand, she ran. The rain plastered her hair to her face and soaked her thin uniform in seconds. Her worn-out work shoes slipped on the wet pavement. "Sir," she called out, her voice thin against the howl of the wind. "Mr. Sterling." He turned, his expression unreadable, as she skidded to a stop in front of him, breathless and dripping. She held out the dollar bill. It was damp and limp in her palm. "Sir," she panted, looking him directly in the eye. You forgot this. I think you might need it more than I do." For a long moment, Silas Sterling just stared at her. He looked from her earnest, rain-streaked face down to the pathetic dollar bill in her outstretched hand. The streetlights reflected in his clear blue eyes, and she saw a flicker of something she couldn't name, astonishment, confusion, something deeper. The corner of his mouth twitched, not quite a smile, not quite a frown. He didn't take the dollar. Instead, he simply nodded, a slow, deliberate motion. "Thank you, Maya," he said, his voice quiet but clear over the storm. "You have no idea." A yellow cab pulled up to the curb. Without another word, he opened the door, got in, and was swallowed by the city lights, leaving Maya standing alone in the rain, clutching the $1 that had just cost her everything. She knew with a certainty that chilled her to the bone that Mr. Henderson had seen the entire exchange from the restaurant window. When she walked back inside, she wouldn't just be a waitress anymore. She would be the unemployed daughter of a dying woman. The warmth of the restaurant felt like a slap in the face after the icy rain. Maya stood dripping on the Persian rug, the $1 bill still clutched in her hand. Every eye was on her. The hushed conversations of the remaining diners, the curious stares of the kitchen staff peeking through the service window, and the thunderous glower of Mr. Henderson. He strode towards her, his face a mask of purple fury. Chloe tried to intercept him. "Dave, listen. She's had a rough week, her mum." "Stay out of this, Chloe," he snarled, not taking his eyes off Maya. He lowered his voice to a venomous whisper. "Are you insane? You run out of my establishment and insult a customer on the street. You tear up a signed credit card slip for nearly $500. He only tipped $1. Dave, Maya said, her voice shaking but steady. It was an insult to the restaurant. She was trying to frame it in a way he might understand, a way that appealed to his obsessive pride in the establishment. "It didn't work. I decide what is an insult to my restaurant," he seethed. "Your job is to smile. Take the money and say thank you, whether it's $1 or 1,000. You don't get to have an opinion. You certainly don't get to make a scene." He pointed a trembling finger towards the staff room. "Get your things. You're finished here." It was exactly what she had expected, but the finality of the words hit her like a physical blow. "Mr. Henderson, please." "Don't Mr. Henderson me. You're a liability. I have to call the bank in the morning and try to explain this charge. Do you have any idea the mess you've made out?" Now, numbly Maya walked to the small, cramped staff room. She could feel Chloe's horrified stare on her back. She changed out of her damp uniform, the black dress suddenly feeling like a stranger's clothes. She packed her few belongings into her tote bag, a well-read paperback, a tube of chapstick, and an empty Tupperware container that once held her dinner. The pickle jar of hope was at home, but she could feel its imagined weight now heavier than ever. Chloe was waiting for her by the back door. "Maya, I am so sorry. He's a pig. I'll talk to him tomorrow. I'll try to—" "Don't, Maya," said, pulling her thin coat tight around her. "It's done. It's okay. It's not okay. What are you going to do?" "I don't know." Maya admitted the truth of that statement, settling in her gut like a stone. "I'll figure something out. I always do." But as she rode the rattling subway train back to Queens, the bravado evaporated, replaced by a cold, creeping dread. The $1 was still in her pocket, a toxic souvenir. What had she been thinking? Pity, compassion. What good was compassion when your mother needed medicine that cost $3,000 a month? What good was taking the moral high ground when it left you unemployed and standing at the edge of a cliff? She had acted on a pure human impulse, a flash of empathy for another soul's perceived poverty. But the world didn't run on empathy. It ran on money, and she had just thrown away her only source of it over $1. She was a fool. When she got back to her apartment, the landlord had slipped a notice under her door. The rent was 3 days late. It was the 3rd notice. The next one would be an eviction. She crumpled it in her hand and threw it in the trash. She sat on her sofa, the springs groaning in protest, and stared at the pickle jar on her dresser. It contained $847 and some change. It had taken her 6 months to save that much. It was a fortune, and simultaneously nothing. It was 2 weeks of the experimental treatment. It was less than 2 months' rent. It was a bandage on a severed limb. Tears she had refused to shed in front of Mr. Henderson now streamed down her face. They were hot tears of rage, frustration, and absolute terror. She had failed. She had failed her mother. She had let her pride, her bizarre moment of pity for a rich old man, destroy everything. She cried until her body ached and her throat was raw, eventually falling into a restless, nightmare-filled sleep on the couch. The next morning, she woke with a pounding headache and a hollow feeling in her chest. The freefall was terrifying. No job, no prospects, just the ticking clock of her mother's illness and the looming threat of homelessness. She spent the day in a daze, mechanically scanning online job boards for waitress positions, knowing that a bad reference from a place like the Gilded Spoon would be a black mark against her. By late afternoon, she had given up. Despair was a thick fog, and she couldn't see a way through it. She was contemplating the humiliating call she would have to make to her aunt in Ohio to beg for money when a sound from the street below broke her trance. It was the low, purring rumble of a high-end engine, a sound that didn't belong on her rundown, noisy block. Curious, she peered through the grimy window. A sleek black sedan, the kind that ferries diplomats and CEOs, was parked at her curb. A woman in a sharply tailored grey suit stepped out of the passenger side. She was tall and poised with her dark hair pulled back in a severe bun. She consulted a tablet in her hand, then looked directly up at Maya's window before walking confidently to the entrance of her building. Maya's heart hammered against her ribs. Was it the landlord, a collections agency? The police? A few moments later, there was a firm, polite knock on her door. Taking a deep breath, Maya opened it a crack. The woman from the car stood there holding a leather portfolio. Maya Rodriguez, the woman asked, her voice cool and professional. Yes, my name is Evelyn Reed. I am the executive assistant to Mr. Silas Sterling. May I have a moment of your time? The name hit Maya like a jolt of electricity. Silas Sterling, the man from the restaurant. The man who had cost her job. Her first instinct was to slam the door. What could he possibly want to mock her further? To serve her with some kind of legal notice for tearing up the receipt. Fear and anger warred within her. Evelyn Reed seemed to sense her hesitation. Her expression didn't change, but her eyes, sharp and intelligent, were assessing. I assure you this is in your best interest, Miss Rodriguez. Against her better judgment, Maya opened the door wider. What is this about? Evelyn's eyes swept over the small, cluttered apartment, taking in the peeling paint, the worn-out furniture, and the prominent pickle jar on the dresser. Her gaze was quick and neutral, betraying no judgment, but Maya felt a flush of shame. Mr. Sterling was very impressed by your interactions last night. Evelyn began, her tone crisp and businesslike. He has requested a meeting with you. Today. Maya stared at her bewildered. Impressed, I ran out into the street and gave him his $1 back. My manager fired me for it. Yes, Mr. Sterling is aware of your termination, Evelyn said smoothly. He made a call to your former manager this morning. I believe Mr. Henderson is now a former manager as well. That piece of information sent a shock wave through Maya. He'd had her boss fired. The power implied by that simple statement was dizzying. Why? Maya asked, her voice small. Mr. Sterling does not appreciate being used as a pretext for cruelty, Evelyn replied simply. Now about the meeting. Mr. Sterling has sent a car for you. But before we proceed, there is a matter of a non-disclosure agreement. She opened the leather portfolio and produced a thick document and a sleek silver pen. This is standard procedure. It legally binds you to confidentiality regarding your meeting with Mr. Sterling, regardless of the outcome. Please read it carefully. Maya took the document. The pages were filled with dense legalese, a foreign language of clauses and subclauses. She felt completely out of her depth. An NDA, a private car, a meeting with a man who could get people fired with a single phone call. Her life had been a simple, brutal equation of hours worked versus bills paid. This was something else, entirely a world operating by rules she couldn't begin to understand. Her mind raced. This was insane. It could be a trick, a scam. But then she looked around her tiny apartment at the eviction notice still in the trash. She thought of her mother lying in that hospital bed. What did she have to lose? Her job was gone. Her dignity was hanging by a thread. She was already in freefall. The only question was whether she would hit the ground, or if someone might improbably catch her. "Where are we going?" she asked, her hand hovering over the signature line. "To Mr. Sterling's primary office," Evelyn replied, with a deep breath that did little to calm her racing heart. Maya signed her name. The signature was shaky, the autograph of a person signing away a life she knew for one she couldn't even imagine. "Very good," Evelyn said, taking the document. "Please gather what you need. The car is waiting." 20 minutes later, Maya was sitting on the plush leather seat of the black sedan as it glided silently through the streets of Manhattan. She had changed into her only good outfit, a simple pair of black slacks and a pale blue blouse she'd bought at a thrift store. She felt like an imposter. The city she saw every day from the bus window looked different from behind the tinted glass of this car, more distant, more imposing. The car pulled into a private underground garage beneath a skyscraper that pierced the clouds on Park Avenue. The Sterling Tower. Evelyn led her through a private elevator, which ascended without a sound and with dizzying speed. There were no buttons. Evelyn simply pressed her thumb to a small glass panel. The doors opened directly into a sprawling penthouse office. The space was bigger than Maya's entire apartment building. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a breathtaking 360-degree view of New York City. The furnishings were minimalist and elegant. A single massive desk of dark wood, a few leather chairs and walls lined not with art, but with bookshelves filled with thousands of leather-bound volumes. And there, standing by the window with his back to her, was Silas Sterling. He was wearing the same grey sweater as the night before, but in this context, it no longer looked shabby. It looked like the quiet confidence of a man who had absolutely nothing to prove. He turned slowly. His blue eyes were just as piercing as she remembered. "Maya Rodriguez," he said, his voice the same low, gravelly baritone. "Thank you for coming. Please have a seat." Evelyn gave a slight nod and exited the elevator doors, closing silently behind her, leaving Maya alone with the man who had, in the span of 24 hours, turned her world completely upside down. He wasn't a retired professor. He wasn't a sad, lonely man counting his last dollars. He was a king in his castle in the sky, and she had no idea why she had been summoned to his court. Maya sat on the edge of a leather chair that probably cost more than her car if she'd had a car. The silence in the office was absolute, broken only by the faint, distant hum of the city far below. Silas Sterling walked over to his desk, but didn't sit behind it. Instead, he leaned against the front, creating a sense of casual intimacy that was far more intimidating than if he'd hidden behind a mountain of mahogany. He picked up a small, simple object from his desk, a worn silver dollar. He turned it over and over in his fingers as he spoke. "I owe you an explanation, Maya," he began. "And an apology. What I did last night was unorthodox. It was also cruel in a way. I cost you your job, and for that I am truly sorry. I have already taken steps to ensure Mr. Henderson will not treat another employee so poorly, and I will, of course, compensate you for any and all lost wages." Maya swallowed hard, unsure how to respond. "Why did you do it?" she asked the question that had been burning in her mind. "The $1 tip. Why?" Silas stopped fiddling with the coin and looked at her directly. "It was a test," he said simply. "But it probably isn't the test you think it is. I wasn't testing your service. Your service was impeccable. I wasn't testing your patience or your professionalism. I was testing something much rarer. I was testing your humanity." He gestured around the vast, empty office. "I live in a world, Maya, that is built on transactions. Every interaction is a negotiation. People don't see me. They see a walking bank vault. They see a name on a building. They laugh at my jokes because they think I might fund their next venture. They agree with my opinions because they want a seat on my board. The humanity gets stripped away layer by layer until all that's left is calculation. He walked back to the window, gazing down at the city. I grew up with nothing. My father was a steel worker in Pittsburgh. My mother cleaned houses. I remember what it was like to count pennies. I built this, he said, his hand sweeping across the panoramic view, from scratch, and for 50 years I thought this was the goal, to accumulate, to win. But lately I've found myself wondering what it's all for. I am surrounded by yes-men, by sycophants, by my own greedy relatives, all waiting for me to die so they can pick the carcass clean. His voice grew quiet, laced with a profound weariness. So I started conducting little experiments. I go to fancy restaurants dressed like a forgotten history professor, and I leave $1. I want to see what happens. I want to find a flicker of something real in a world that has become entirely fake for me. He turned to face her again. 9 times out of 10, I am met with a forced smile and a curse, whispered under the breath. Sometimes there's a confrontation, a demand for a better tip. The manager is called. It's always ugly. It's always about the money they feel they were cheated out of. It's always transactional. But you, he said, taking a step towards her. You did something no one has ever done. The anger was there, I saw it in your eyes. The disappointment, the hurt. That's the normal part. But you looked past it. You looked at me, a stranger who had just insulted you, and you saw a person. You invented a story for me in your head, a story where I was the one who was struggling, where I was the one who needed help. He was standing in front of her now. You ran out into the rain, not to curse me, not to demand more, but to give back the only thing you had received. You offered me compassion when I had offered you contempt. In that moment, Maya, you weren't a waitress, and I wasn't a billionaire. We were just 2 people, and you showed me a grace I had forgotten existed. Maya was speechless. The whole bizarre, painful experience was being reframed into something she couldn't comprehend. It wasn't an insult. It was an audition. I had my assistant look into you this morning. He continued, his voice softening. I know about your mother, Clara. I know about her condition. I know about the bills, the jar, the struggle. And it only makes what you did more extraordinary. A person with every reason to be bitter, to be selfish, to demand what is hers, chose kindness instead. He walked back to his desk and opened a drawer, pulling out a thick, bound portfolio. He placed it on the polished wood in front of her. I am an old man, Maya. I have no children, only a nephew who embodies the very greed I've come to despise. I have decided to give my fortune away. All of it. I'm starting a new foundation, the Sterling Compassion Initiative. Its mission will be simple to find and support people who are falling through the cracks, people for whom a small act of kindness can make the difference between giving up and going on. He pushed the portfolio towards her. The foundation has billions in assets. It has a board of directors and a team of lawyers and accountants. But it doesn't have a soul. It doesn't have a leader. It needs someone to run it who understands that true poverty isn't a lack of money, but a lack of compassion. It needs someone who knows the value of $1, both when it is given and when it is received. Maya stared at the portfolio, her heart pounding so hard she could hear it in her ears. On the cover, in simple gold lettering, were the words, Proposal for Executive Director. I'm not asking you to be my waitress, Maya. Silas Sterling said, his blue eyes locking onto hers. I'm offering you the chance to run my foundation, I am offering you a salary that will take care of your mother's medical needs for the rest of her life and then some. But more than that, I am offering you a purpose. I'm offering you the chance to take the kindness that you showed a stranger in the rain and spread it across the world." He leaned back. "The choice, of course, is yours." Maya looked from his expectant face down to the proposal. Her mind was a whirlwind of shock, disbelief, and a terrifying, burgeoning hope. This was impossible. It was a dream. But the weight of the portfolio under her fingertips felt real. The view of the city spreading out before her was real. The quiet, intense conviction in the old man's eyes was real. Her life, which had been a dead-end street just this morning, had suddenly opened up into an infinite highway. Accepting Silas's offer was the easiest and hardest decision of Maya's life. The word yes was simple to say, but the reality it ushered in was a tidal wave. The first and most important change was Clara. Within 48 hours, her mother was transferred by private medical transport to the prestigious Mount Sinai Hospital. She was seen by Dr. Annabelle Fisher, the leading expert in the country on her specific disorder. For the first time, the doctors spoke not of management, but of remission. When Maya walked into her mother's new private room, filled with sunlight and flowers, and saw the look of bewildered hope on Clara's face, she broke down and wept with relief, so profound it felt like a physical weight being lifted from her soul. "Misha, what is this? How?" Clara asked, her voice weak but clear. "I got a new job, Mom," Maya said, laughing through her tears. "A really, really good job." The second change was her address. Evelyn Reed, who had transformed from an intimidating figure into an indispensable guide, arranged a corporate apartment for her in a sleek building just a few blocks from Sterling Tower. It was clean, spacious, and had a doorman. After years of leaky faucets and noisy neighbors, the silence and security felt like an unimaginable luxury. But as the initial shock wore off, the immensity of her new role began to set in. Running a multi-billion-dollar foundation wasn't about having a good heart. It was about budgets, logistics, legal compliance, and public relations. Her office at the Sterling Tower was next to Silas's, and it was staffed with a small elite team who looked at her with a mixture of curiosity and thinly veiled skepticism. They had MBAs from Harvard and Yale. She had a community college degree and a certificate in food handling safety. Silas, however, was a patient mentor. "Don't try to be them," he advised her during one of their daily meetings. "I hired you for your perspective, not your resume. Your boardroom was a busy restaurant. Your negotiations were with difficult customers. Your budgeting was making $80 last a week. You have more practical experience in scarcity and human need than any of them. That is your strength. Don't ever forget it." Her first major task was to develop the Foundation's inaugural project. She spent weeks poring over data, but the spreadsheets and reports felt sterile and distant. Frustrated, she decided to follow her instincts. She went back to the places she knew, the free clinics with long lines, the underfunded after-school programs, the soup kitchens struggling for donations. She didn't go as a director, but as a volunteer. She listened to people's stories just as she used to at the restaurant. It was in a struggling neighborhood in the Bronx that she found her project. An old community center, the Northwood Center, was a week away from closing its doors forever. It was the only safe place for kids to go after school, a place where seniors got a hot meal and where people could get help with job applications. Its director, a tired but fiercely dedicated woman named Maria, was out of options. Maya brought the proposal to Silas, not just to save the center, but to expand it, a full renovation, a new STEM lab for the kids, a dedicated job training facility, and a partnership with a local clinic to provide free health screenings. It was ambitious, personal, and exactly the kind of ground-up, high-impact project he'd envisioned. But not everyone was pleased. The introduction to Silas's nephew Tristan Sterling was an event Maya had been dreading. He was the antithesis of his uncle, young, handsome, in a slick, predatory way, and dressed in suits that screamed their price tag. He held a nominal position on the Foundation's board, a token gesture from Silas that Tristan clearly saw as his birthright. He met Maya in the Foundation's conference room, circling her as he spoke, his tone dripping with condescension. "So you're the one," he said, a smirk playing on his lips. "The waitress. Uncle Silas has always been prone to sentimentality. A real-life Cinderella story. How quaint. It's a pleasure to meet you, Mr. Sterling." Maya said, keeping her voice even. "Oh, please call me Tristan. We're practically family now, aren't we? I must say, I've reviewed your little pet project. The Northwood Center. It's a money pit, a drop in the ocean. The Foundation should be thinking bigger. Legacy projects, naming rights on university wings, art museum endowments. Things that last, things that matter. Helping children and seniors matters to me," Maya stated plainly. Tristan laughed a short, ugly sound. "That's adorable. But this is the big leagues, darling. Your bleeding heart is going to be a liability. My uncle may be infatuated with your authenticity, for now, but he's an old man. And when he's gone, the board will listen to reason. They'll listen to me." His threat was clear. She was a temporary amusement, and he was the heir apparent. The meeting left a sour taste in her mouth. Tristan was everything Silas had described, a man who saw charity as a branding exercise, and compassion as a weakness. He began to make her life difficult in subtle ways. Key documents for the Northwood project would go missing. Meetings with city officials she had scheduled would be mysteriously cancelled at the last minute. Negative articles from anonymous sources began appearing in gossip columns and financial blogs, questioning the wisdom of putting an unqualified waitress in charge of a major philanthropic enterprise. Maya knew Tristan was behind it all. It was a war of 1,000 cuts designed to make her look incompetent and overwhelmed, to prove to Silas that his experiment was a failure. The pressure was immense. The skeptical looks from her staff grew more pronounced. She started second-guessing herself, the old anxieties and insecurities creeping back in. One evening, working late in her office, staring at a mountain of paperwork and a hostile email from a city contractor, she felt the familiar weight of despair pressing down on her. She was an imposter. She was in over her head. Tristan was right. She was just a waitress playing dress-up in a world she didn't belong in. The storm she faced now was different from the one she had run into that fateful night, but it threatened to drown her just the same. The turning point came during a tense project update meeting. Tristan was there exuding smug confidence. The renovation of the Northwood Center was bogged down. The primary construction contractor, a firm Tristan had helpfully recommended, was claiming unforeseen structural issues, doubling their estimate and pushing the timeline back by 6 months. "As I predicted," Tristan said, addressing the board members present. "But looking at Maya, this project is a quagmire. Poor due diligence, emotional decision-making. We're bleeding money with nothing to show for it. Perhaps it's time to cut our losses and redirect the funds to a more stable investment." The room was tense. The board members, old associates of Silas, looked uncertain. Maya felt her cheeks flush with humiliation. She had trusted the reports. She had trusted the process. She had been naive. That evening she drove to the Bronx, not to the community center, but to a small local diner a few blocks away. It was the kind of place she knew intimately, the smell of coffee and frying onions, the cracked vinyl on the booths, the weary but watchful eyes of the woman behind the counter. She ordered a coffee and just listened. The men in the booth behind her, construction workers in dusty boots, were complaining. "Can't believe that scum Varelli," one of them grumbled. "He's got that sterling foundation job locked down, and he's not even using a local crew, bringing in his own guys, paying them peanuts." Worse than that, another one chimed in. "My cousin worked for him on a job last year. Said Varelli's got a whole scam going. He bids low, then finds a million problems to jack up the price. He's in bed with the inspector too." Maya's blood ran cold. Varelli Construction. That was their contractor, the firm Tristan had recommended. Armed with a name, Maya did what she did best. She talked to people. She spent the next 2 days not in boardrooms, but on the streets of Northwood. She spoke with Maria, the center's director. She spoke to local hardware store owners. She spoke to the old men who played dominoes in the park. She used the foundation's resources to hire a private investigator, a retired NYPD detective, to look into Varelli and his connection to Tristan. What they uncovered was a clear pattern of fraud. Tristan was getting a substantial kickback from Varelli for every inflated invoice the foundation paid. The structural issues were fabricated a simple pretext to milk the foundation for millions. Tristan wasn't just trying to make her fail, he was actively robbing the charity his uncle had created. The day of the final board meeting, to decide the fate of the Northwood project, Maya came prepared. Tristan began the meeting with a condescending eulogy for her well-intentioned but failed initiative, formally motioning to terminate the project. "Thank you for your input, Tristan," Maya said, standing up, her voice clear and strong. She no longer felt like an imposter. She felt like herself. "However, I have a different presentation." She didn't present spreadsheets or charts. She presented people. She played a recorded interview with a local highly respected engineer who had done a pro bono inspection and confirmed the building was sound. She showed invoices from Varelli's other projects, highlighting his identical pattern of price gouging. She presented a sworn affidavit from a disgruntled former Varelli employee detailing the kickback scheme with Tristan. And for her final exhibit, she presented a new plan. She had fired Varelli Construction. She had already met with a consortium of local union-certified contractors from the Bronx who had submitted a detailed, fair-priced bid to complete the work in half the time. Hiring them wouldn't just build a center, it would invest directly back into the community it was meant to serve. The room was silent. Tristan's face was ashen. He sputtered, calling it slander lies. But the evidence was irrefutable. Silas, who had been sitting quietly at the head of the table, finally spoke. His voice was soft, but carried the weight of iron. "Tristan," he said, his disappointment palpable. "I gave you my name, my trust, and a seat at this table. You saw it only as an opportunity to steal from the people I intend to help. You are a living testament to everything I have come to despise." He looked at the board. "Tristan Sterling is removed from this board and all other Sterling enterprises effective immediately. Security will see him out." Tristan was escorted from the room, his legacy reduced to a single shameful meeting. Silas then looked at Maya, and for the first time she saw a genuine, unrestrained smile on his face. "Well done, Director Rodriguez," he said. "Well done." 3 months later, the new Northwood Community Center opened its doors. It was a beautiful, vibrant space, filled with the laughter of children and the grateful chatter of seniors. Maya stood next to Silas at the ribbon-cutting ceremony, watching the community pour into the building. She wasn't a waitress anymore. She wasn't an imposter. She was the woman who had built this. She had done it, not by trying to be like the men in suits, but by being herself. She had used her empathy, her ability to listen, and her understanding of how the world worked from the ground up. Silas handed her a small velvet box. Inside was the worn silver dollar from his desk. A reminder, he said, of what true value looks like. Maya closed her hand around the coin. She looked at the bustling community center, at her mother, healthy and smiling in the front row, and at the old man who had seen something in her that she hadn't even seen in herself. She finally understood. The $1 tip hadn't been a test of her character. It had been a key unlocking a door to a life she never knew was possible. Her reaction hadn't just changed her life, it had allowed her to change the lives of countless others, proving that the greatest fortune isn't what you have, but what you choose to give away. Maya's story teaches us a powerful lesson that resonates deep in our hearts. It reminds us that our circumstances do not define our character. In a world that so often measures worth in dollars and cents, her journey proves that the real currencies are compassion, integrity, and grace under pressure. That single dollar from Silas Sterling wasn't an insult. It was a question, and Maya's answer, a selfless act of kindness when she had every reason to be bitter, changed the entire equation of her life. She discovered that her greatest strength wasn't something she had to learn in a boardroom. It was the humanity she carried with her all along. If this story moved you and made you think about the hidden tests we all face in our daily lives, please take a moment to hit that like button. Share this video with someone who might need a reminder of the power of kindness. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more real-life stories that inspire and uplift. Thank you for watching.